Now to your community focus at 4. Tensions continue to simmer in Eastern Europe as Russia says it is not planning to attack Ukraine. The U.S. still isn't convinced.
Here to break down what exactly is happening, Vice President of Strategic Initiatives at Salve, Regina University, Jim Ludes. Jim, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so President Biden says that he expects President Putin to carry out an invasion of Ukraine within several days. But I feel like we've been hearing about a potential imminent invasion now for several weeks. So where do things stand?
Well, invasions take time. Not to be flip about it, but I think that what we've seen over the last several months is a steady increase of Russian forces around Ukraine. Initially, it was just around Ukraine's eastern border, but in the last month or so, they've also now moved forces into neighboring Belarus to the north. Combined with forces in the Black Sea, Ukraine is essentially surrounded on 3 sides. And so in defense, you typically think about capabilities and intentions. It is clear, and it's clear from commercially available satellite imagery and stuff that's available on social media, that Russia has the capabilities in place to invade Ukraine if they have the intention to do so. President Putin says they have no intention of doing so. U.S. intelligence indicates that, in fact, there is good evidence that Russia has every intention of invading Ukraine. And I think that the next couple of days, maybe the next week or 2 at the most, are going to be critical.
A helpful breakdown of kind of the back and forth I think we keep hearing of this person says this country says that. So hoping you can break it down for us a little bit more. What exactly is Russia looking for here?
This is the $1 million question. I think that there are some people who believe, principally countries act for their own interests. They act because of what their leaders think is essential to their own national needs. With Vladimir Putin, it's difficult to understand exactly what his motivation is here. I come back to the fact that this is a president who has said repeatedly that the collapse of the old Soviet Union was the greatest geostrategic disaster of the 20th century. That's some statement. And I think that what we have to consider is that for reasons that are maybe unique to Vladimir Putin, but maybe central to Russia's sense of identity and self and role in the world, they're looking to reclaim some of that former Soviet imperial glory. One of the things that's really sort of impossible to fathom, the demands that they're making of NATO to roll back NATO's membership to prior to 1997. That includes all of the former Soviet states like Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and a bunch of former Warsaw Pact, which was the old Soviet military alliance that countered NATO. And they want all of those countries excluded from NATO today. NATO's never going to agree to that. And that's the kind of negotiating position that makes you think that perhaps they're not interested in a deal. Perhaps the decision's already been made to invade Ukraine, and the rest is just timing.
And Jim, we've been assured that the U.S. is not going to engage in a ground war in Ukraine. President Biden said on Sunday if the U.S. and Russia begin firing at each other, it would essentially amount to a world war. But we know that U.S. troops have been deployed to that region. So what exactly is the U.S. doing?
Yeah, so the troops that have been deployed to NATO countries. So Article 5 of the NATO treaty basically pledges that an attack on one country is an attack on all the members of NATO. And you might remember after 9/11, there were NATO aircraft patrolling the skies of the United States from further attack because we were getting ready to do things elsewhere in the world. An attack on one is an attack on all. And so what we're doing is we're reassuring our easternmost NATO allies that we're not going to, as the president put this past weekend, we will not let the Russians violate an inch of territory of any of our NATO allies, but we're not going to go fight a war in Ukraine. And Ukraine, we should note, is not a NATO member.
And Jim, we have about 30 seconds left, but curious, one more question. Russia's government expelled the deputy U.S. ambassador from the country. To you, what does that signal?
Nothing good. I mean, it indicates that the tit for tat back and forth between Washington and Moscow is going to continue. But throwing diplomats out of countries typically is not a sign that you're going to make real progress. The U.S. ambassador is still in Moscow. He was in receipt this morning of Moscow's response to the American proposals for further negotiations. I think that this is a fraught situation that we're going to see play out in the next couple of days, maybe a week or two. But at the end of the day, this is very dangerous, very serious, with some real dire consequences at stake, potentially for NATO, for the United States, and certainly for the people of Ukraine.
the Vice President of Strategic Initiatives at Salve, Regina University, Jim Ludes. Jim, thanks so much for your expertise here.
Thanks for having me.
And looking ahead to tomorrow, when Providence Mayor Jorge Elorza will be joining us live in studio for our monthly interview with him. That's coming up tomorrow in your Community Focus.